Why, Crusher, it's good to see you.
You're listening to Crush Performance, your weekly source for sport performance and athletic development information. Get the Crush blogs, podcasts, and performance links at crushperformance.com.
And welcome to Crush Performance, everybody. I am Jeff Rochelle, and we're your weekly source for performance information. Hey, if you have any questions, comments, smart remarks, reach out. Go to jeffrochelle.com, write to me there. DM me on any of our social media platforms. Search out Crush Performance. We answer every single message we get. And if you do need some help, I'm not going to guarantee we have the answers, but I will guarantee this. We know somebody who does, and we will find it for you. So please do reach out. And listen, if you have an idea for the show, if you have a topic you want us to investigate, let us know. We've dedicated segments, even entire episodes, to your ideas. And that being said, we are heading into our 20th season. So I want to thank all the crushers who have been following us throughout the years. And I want to welcome everybody new. Listen, if you have a guest or a conversation from the past that you would like us to revisit, let us know. I have my list, and we're starting to revisit with some of those people. But over the course of this year, we're going to go back to the beginning of the show 20 years ago. And we're going to try to catch up with some of those past guests and find out what they're doing. We're going to revisit their conversations and revisit the science as well. Some of it still holds very, very true today. And every one of these people continues to do amazing things to help guide us through this crazy world we call sport and sport performance. Today is no exception. And though he has never been on Crush Performance before, we've tried, our schedules just haven't matched. He has had a massive influence on me and on our athletes through our programming. His mindset, his approach, his research has really helped form some of my thought processes when it comes to helping our athletes achieve their potential. And around the world, his work has influenced tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions and millions of people. Today, I'm very happy to share with you today's guest, Dr. John Ratey, the author of Spark. He's written 11 books. He is an associate clinical professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School, and we are going to have a fantastic discussion today. The revolutionary new science of exercise in the brain. When the book came out, in the early 2000s, it was just a game changer. Though some of the research in the late 90s and early 2000s were heading this way, really understanding, what's going on in the brain and how does that influence development. And not just in sport, we're talking everywhere. We're talking skill and talent development. We're talking health and wellness. We're talking about learning and developing and the implications just for general life. So today we're going to dive into Spark and the user's guide to the brain and some other of Dr. Ratey's incredible work, okay? I am really excited about this conversation, so let's get to it. All right, everybody, I am so proud to introduce to you Dr. John Ratey, Associate Clinical Professor of Psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. Dr. Ratey, it is an honor to have you on the show. I've been looking forward to this for quite some time.
Well, it's great to be on and great to be with you, who actually not just paid attention to Spark and some of my other books, but also the User's Guide to the Brain, which is an important book for me and obviously for you. So,
well, You've published 11 books, numerous publications. Everybody, if you want more information on Dr. Ratey, you go to johnratey.com. But yes, we could start here. The User's Guide to the Brain. I just thought it was great, and I got it shortly after it came out. And I was just fascinated by this idea of understanding how the brain worked. I'd really dabbled in psychiatry the psychology rather in my academic side, running sort of parallel with exercise science. And so I've always been fascinated by connecting the dots of physical performance and then brain performance. And at some point in my career, the strength and conditioning, the speed, power, strength actually became very easy. And I just saw a big gap. We just weren't quite harnessing the potential of these athletes, and it had nothing to do with their physical presence. It had to do with their perception and their awareness. And again, those 4 theaters of the brain that you introduce in the user's guide to the brain was it what it changed my entire thought process and probably my professional career, Dr. Ratey.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, no, that last chapter was a labor of love. The whole book was, but just it evolved. The book evolved, and the 4 theaters wasn't planned until I really got into it, to writing it, and I had a lot of help for doing that over spent about 9-10 years, or eight years, really researching that book. And along the way, I wrote 4 others. So, but always in the background. I wanted to learn about the brain for myself, and I had done a lot of neurology and neurosurgery in medical school, and thought I knew some things about the brain, but I knew I didn't know much. And boy, in the 90s, that was really reinforced. So I tried to translate what I was learning into books, and that's what I've done with all my books. And Spark, the book where exercise affects how exercise affects the brain, and it was all about learning about it and then presenting it to people.
Yeah, I have a sign up in my office here. It says it has on it connecting the dots, and for me, that's what this is for me. And you've been a big part of our thinking here. Over the years, Dr. Ratey, on the radio show, we're into our 20th season here, and we've done an entire year dedicated to the brain game, neuroscience and biofeedback, and then we've talked about talent and talent ID and skill acquisition. We just finished a year looking at kind of, the brain game that sort of led us down the path and into the conversation. And one of the main themes for this season is perception. And you talk about that in the user's guide to the brain. And one of the things there really opened my eyes to the potential of this, right? And that was the fact that perception is incredibly trainable, but I think you have to have an understanding of it, right?
Sure, you absolutely. It's trainable, but yeah, you have to know all the variables that you're dealing with. It's not like an easy thing, but yes, we're constantly training our perception as we appreciate the world, growing up as an infant and getting into the world, and if you have something that's off, then the whole world that you see and the whole way your brain is organized is going to be different. And this is why we have so many varieties of people with so many different brain issues. It's like, okay, because their setup was different.
It's interesting, that kind of gets me thinking. So I'm just making notes here as you're talking so I don't forget a point here. And, it kind of brings me back to, some of the work by the great scientists like Anders Ericsson or Barnes and Sosniak that looked at the influence of environment on development, right? And one of the things that Anders Ericsson, his work kind of got skewed a little bit by some authors out there, that whole 10,000 hour rule and everything. And when you dig down deep, or at least for me anyway, when I dig down deep, and I was lucky enough to speak with him a couple of times, he was more focused on not so much the time that was put in, though that was very important, but what you did in that time, the deliberate work. And, one of the things you mentioned in the user's guide to the brain is the idea of attention and then emotion and then movement, right? All these things coming together. But this idea of attention and maybe working deliberately is important in every aspect of life, maybe.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, think about it. When I go running, and I don't do much of that anymore. I'm now 77, but, but when I do, it has to be, I have to go for something. I have to, go for the next telephone pole or the next light post, or down to get my Starbucks in the morning. Intention is important because that helps you focus on what your goal is, and helps it really adds power to your exercise.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, so I don't want to cut you off there, but oh my goodness, you got my brain racing back to Spark here, or over to Spark, I should say.
Yes.
Again, one of the seminal books. It is for us and our followers. It's been ranked a crush must read for any coach, parent, or athlete out there. It's just such an important work. But one of the things you say in there that kind of resonates with what we're talking about is you talk about exercise, and then it was just sort of, off of a reference to the Naperville, 0 hour fitness thing. But the idea that exercise is more effective holistically, internally, externally, when you want to do it, when there's a goal and objective, when you want to do it. That's an interesting thing. And that kind of circles back for me, back to the user's guide for the brain, to the understanding of emotion and intention and intention, right? The idea of the emotional side for me is really, really important. And Dr. Ratey, I don't think enough coaches, maybe even parents, and I'm a parent of 3 daughters. I'm highly outnumbered here, right? But understanding and paying attention to emotion can be a powerful, powerful thing.
Oh God, yes. It drives so much of our life, and and without it, we wouldn't know what to do. We wouldn't know what to go for. Yeah, and it and I make a point in Spark about emotion. That there's motion, and then there's emotion. Well, so tied to all our. That's what the sort of the light bulb for when in Spark was how tied up movement is with cognition and with emotion, both of them. It's really tied up in the brain. I mean, and for instance, the cognitive apparatus in our brain, if you will, I'll use that term just in general, and that means all kinds of stuff in the brain that are involved in cognition and thinking and understanding. That's the same pathway that movement is. So when you're moving, when you're exercising, you're turning on those circuits. You're making them lit. We say lit up because we're thinking of how it shows in a scan, right?
I love it.
And you do that just by walking, just by whatever you're doing. And that's the thing. People say, well, what's the best exercise? Something you're going to do, and come back to, because it's so important to have that. That's where intention comes in, because then you'll say, I want to train to get here. So you'll do that. You'll come back every day to do that.
Yeah. Well, Spark, everybody, is again a crush must read, the revolutionary new science of exercise and the brain. And I don't know when the breakthrough happened in physiology or neurology, the history, but I think we've always understood they're connected. And, so I'm going to share with you my story, how I kind of break it down for my athletes. I'll see what you think of this. So I'm a big Star Wars fan. Again, Star Wars was one of the first, I think, big theater movies I ever saw as a kid. So, of course, it impacts you, right? But this whole idea of metachlorians, these symbiotic, unities that help everybody survive. Dr. Ratey, does it make sense to you when I talk to my athletes and when they're maybe struggling, or when we're trying to overcome a hardship or a plateau or a roadblock, I kind of bring it back to brain and attitude. And the way I kind of explain it to them is say, look, guys, the brain, the tool, the body is just a tool the brain uses to get something done. So the better the connection we can make between the brain and the body, and the more things we can do in training, in the safety of training, the more things you're potentially going to be able to do in the chaos of competitive sport. Do you like that kind of thought process, that the body is a tool the brain uses, they work together, or what do you think?
Sure, that's one way to explain it, but you're right. The more various things you can do with movement and with exercise, and then throwing in curveballs, throwing in, other kinds of obstacles will, first of all, what happens is that turns the brain on even more. And by turning the brain on, it means you're going to use more brain cells, and you're going to make them richer, and you're going to make them more likely to bind one to another. And that's the secret of learning, right? Both the physical learning as well as learning in the classroom. So, and the more you stress, because it comes down to stress too, right? And that's really important. Stress is good, because stress for the brain is good up to a point, because that's what your guys do. That's what your athletes, your guys and your girls do. And by the way, I had 2 girls, and both of them were jocks. So, so
You get it.
I was a soccer dad. So,
Yeah.
I took them everywhere. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, fantastic. In the book, in Spark, you make a statement, and I have it highlighted. It's right here. I could actually show it to you. The page is earmarked, and I have it highlighted with a star beside it. You say exercise. The point of exercise is to build and condition the brain. Typically in my world, in the fitness and strength and conditioning world, we use exercise to primarily get a physical reaction, right? A physical development. But when you start thinking about the impact on the brain when you exercise, man, that opens up a whole universe of development and potential.
Absolutely. And that's basically what you're talking about too, is that you're saying, okay, how can we maximize the learning potential of the brain in terms of movement, in terms of reacting to stimuli, to challenges, to the curveballs that we get, and that's when the brain gets really jazzed up, and all those things are very important, and especially if they're directed towards a goal or towards something, and that's the intentionality that we talk about now. It's so much easier to do any kind of exercise or things that are more repetitive if there's some intention involved. Even in the reps, is just like, okay, with your strength guys, okay, let's do 5, let's do 10. You got numbers that they're going for, and so that leads them to do it and to do more.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's fascinating. And I think that takes us right back. And I know you've talked about this since you've written the book, probably tens of thousands of times, but you go back to one of the greatest real life human experiments ever done, in my opinion, the Naperville 0 Hour Fitness. What a fascinating thing, and brilliant on those phys ed teachers as well. Like that, it still fascinates me to this day. And I know you have been a huge proponent of restructuring school and learning with this kind of an ideology in mind. Absolutely fascinating. I'm surprised and maybe even a little disappointed it's not more mainstream at this point.
Oh no, it's and we tried back in the 80s. We were trying, and a big way is to change the educational system, in the 90s especially, to get people on board with using PE as a valuable tool, as opposed to just something that kids had to do, or the athletes, the jocks. It wasn't just for the jocks. In fact, it was for the not the jocks, for the people that never really were athletic, because they needed to train their bodies and their brains so that they could maximize their potential. And it's all about that.
Yeah,
it's all about
the fascination of exercise, early exercise in the day, priming their young brains for the learning. One of the phys ed students, and this is in the book, this is a quote from the book. One of the phys ed teachers said, "It's our job to create brain cells through exercise and training. It's the other teacher's job to fill it." I love it.
Right. Yeah, that was that group of PE teachers at Naperville were very special. They should have gotten a badge as junior neuroscience teachers because they were really into it, and it was the whole group of them that saw what they were doing and said, well, we're really doing something really important. And so again, attentionality. So that drove the whole program because they knew what they were doing.
Yep. I feel they should have been awarded a Nobel Prize for something because it was brilliant. But not just that, the outcomes. I think they went in with a kind of an idea of what they wanted to accomplish, but boy, oh boy, the body composition of these students, the academic scores, the science and the math, the global science and math scores that is far exceeds the average of the U.S. School system. Incredibly fascinating, and I don't know how that's not resonating to the world.
Well, it is something that people, when they hear about it, they say, "Oh gosh!" So just because they have PE every day, 45 minutes, and they really do have physical education, they really do get exercise during that period of time, from first grade to senior year.
Yeah.
And so what did this do? Yes, the reason why I learned about this place is because they did a frontline on the, obesity in adolescents.
Right.
And they were talking about it, and then they talk about they introduced the head PE teacher in Naperville, who really is the father of Spark, who said, our kids are not fit, even though we have them for 45 minutes every day. So we have to repurpose our time and look at fitness first. And if you talk to any PE teacher over time too, is that fitness is usually fifth or fourth on their agenda.
Yeah.
Well, right. Because it's all kinds of, learning the games, all that other stuff. But fitness is not as primary as it should be. And they made it primary. And boy, did that ever change things. It changed the student population, and they got on frontline because they had done BMIs of their 19,000 students in this big area in Naperville, west of Chicago. And they found that only 3% of them were overweight. And this is back in the 2000s, right? 3%, and the average in the US was about 33%.
Yeah, right.
Overweight,
Yeah.
And so it's remarkable. But then what got me on an airplane was the fact that a few years before that, they took the International Science and Math test as a country. You could do that. The school system could take it as a country. And that's where every country takes it every 3 years to see how they're doing in science and math against the rest of the world. Right. And that's where you see the Asian countries and Finland being in the top 5 all the time. And why? Well, because they spend so much time learning, but in Finland, they spend a lot of time exercising. But anyway, it's a fine point. But so they took it as a country, and they came in number 1 in the world in science and number 6 in math, which is just amazing, because the average in the US on that test was in the high teens somewhere, 16, 17.
Right.
And so something was happening here. And this is what drove me to the book, and I said, whoa, we got to know this.
Yes.
This is a public health issue, and this is an educational issue. All those findings, there are all those areas overlapped or came together. And so that's what was my motivation, was to get this story out and to develop it.
Yeah, and if I understand correctly, if I understand the whole thing, that's a fascinating part of the story. But Naperville, what typically happens, I think the way it was described in the book, is typically countries will cherry pick the top students to participate in these global. Naperville took it on internally. They took their students and took it on and ranked top in the world. That, oh my gosh, that is just incredible stuff.
Right. Yeah. 99% of the kids took the test.
Yeah.
It wasn't what's their best classes or anything, but and yes, it just blew me away and blew everybody away who was involved with it. And and people say, nah, this can't happen. And I'll tell you, I was visited so often by these journalists who would come wanting to do a story on Spark, and then they saw me first, and they went to Naperville. I told them, I said, look, you're not going to believe it, what the kids are like. I mean, they're all fit. They're all very interested in what they're doing, and in many aspects of education and development that they had. And they would come back to me and say, look, I want to die and come back as a student in Naperville.
Amen to that. And it's all connected. Again, for everybody out there that's not familiar with the story, it's all connected to structured and deliberate exercise for these students at certain times of the day, just basically priming their learning. And Dr. Ratey, there's a fascinating story here for me that came out of it as well. One of the phys ed teachers early on, what they would have to do, they would do like a mile run on the track or something, right? Or they would do a lap of the track, would be this at the early start. And he would notice, the jock kids would come flying in, at a certain time. And then there would be all the scragglers. And he said he used to get kind of frustrated with these kids because he thought they weren't trying that hard. But then they got the polar heart rate monitors. And he goes, oh my goodness, what a gut check for a teacher and somebody who's supposed to be a mentor. He goes, prior to this, I think he says something like this. He says, I wasn't a good coach, and I certainly wasn't a good mentor, because when we looked at the heart rate monitors on these girls, the fast runners were coming in like 4 minutes or something, and they were coming in at 7.5, 8 minutes. He thought they weren't working hard. But when they looked at their heart rate monitors, they were working as or even harder than the kids that came in first. That to me was an eye-opener, and such a huge part of this story, just an endearing part of this story of how these teachers were learning as they were going. What an incredible adventure. Yes.
And that was, and the heart rate monitors were an important part of the story, because they got it. They developed this. So I mean, it wasn't like somebody just threw all this stuff together, but they realized what the heart rate monitor could be for their students, and then they got a bunch of heart rate monitors for all the students, or they would come in and put a heart rate monitor on in their classes, and they got their grade by the amount of time they spent in their cardiac training zone. Can you imagine that? I mean, and this was a problem later on, because other schools copied it, and they were having a hard time getting their jocks to drive into the cardiac training zone. So they would be exhausted. and it was just interesting to sort of see what developed. But yeah, and because the cardiac training zone will mean that you're maximizing your effort, and your brain is going to be on fire, because we know that when you move, you turn your brain on, and the more you move and the more intense you move, the more your brain is on fire. And by that I mean clicking away, looking at things, being able to change uh, everything, to be able to take it all in.
Yeah. Well, you meant something very interesting. And I think this is where, just so you know, we've never met before. This is actually, unfortunately, the first time we've ever spoken. I wish it happened sooner, but I'm very glad. But you have influenced, again, not just me, but so many people with your works, right? I mean, it's such great, important work. But you keep mentioning this one thing that I use with my athletes, and I believe it came from you. And I believe it was in one of your TED Talks or one of your presentations that I saw, where you actually, I think, showed images of a brain. And I remember one discussion. I think this was out of Harvard, I believe. I'll have to go back and look. But they were just looking at brain activity and the relationship to physical activity. And they'd kind of, put up a picture of a brain with lit up areas of a person walking on a paved path. And then they take the same person and they show their brain, and it is, like you say, lit up like a Christmas tree, because they were on a dirt path with rocks and roots and different pitches and everything. And that, for me, that was many 10, 20 years ago, maybe I first saw that. That again was a turning point for me as a professional, going, holy smokes, man. And then for my work in Major League Baseball, looking at these hitters just through batting practice, going through the motions, I go, what are we doing here? We're not getting better at this moment in time, because I know their brains are quiet and just on cruise control. So that really changed my personal approach to development and the environment we create for our athletes. But this whole thing, you'll hear me say it all the time, Dr. Ratey, I think you'd enjoy it. Hey, right now, your brain's lit up like a Christmas tree, I'll say.
Oh, that's great. That's great, because that's what you want, because that means that is an ideal brain to learn, to take in information, whether it's getting their swing down or the way they're standing or all that kind of stuff. They're more appreciative, they're more aware of it, and they'll remember that, and they'll code that in, for then becomes more automatic as they go on and they practice and they do it again and again and again. And it's one of the things that you mentioned about making more brain cells, that exercise does in fact make more brain cells, and in a process called neurogenesis. Yeah,
Yep.
It's sort of the primal part of neuroplasticity, which means that our brain is plastic and we can change it. And the best way to maximize the plasticity is to feed the brain all kinds of neurotransmitters, hormones, little bits of stuff that come up from the periphery, from the body, or from the brain itself. And that turns the plasticity factor on, and by plasticity, which means we can change the brain. And the only way we learn anything is if our brain changes.
Right. Yeah. Fascinating. Yeah. Fascinating. And all, like the electricity, we're like an electrical chemical plant, right? And in your book, Driven to Distraction, fascinating read on just some of the chemical interactions, the neurotransmitters, and also not just that, Dr. Ratey, but you also talk a lot about how our diets influence and how they're affecting public health right now. We have this thing on our show called The Crush, War on Sugar, which I think you would be very, very proud of, where we talk about, just the downside of the food industry out there right now.
Yeah. And we take this up in a subsequent book that I wrote called Go Wild, where we talk about the fat phobia and the press towards using more and more carbohydrates in our diets way back. This was way back, and everybody became afraid of fats and cholesterol and all that, not knowing what their sequelae was going to be. But in fact, now we know that if the more the more carbohydrate you take in, more, and then you take in an excess, it's going to turn into fats in the body and in the brain, and it's going to lay down bad fats, and so one has to be careful with sort of fiats, like, okay, we no more fats, only carbs, and that's what the industry presented
Yep.
for the longest time, and it's still caught in that yeah, still caught.
Yeah, I think in the U.S. and in Canada as well, in the early '90s, the actual food guides changed dramatically to eliminate all kinds of fats, but really promote carbohydrates. I think it was one of the huge tipping points for human health in the history of mankind. One of the, maybe, would it be safe to say, one of the worst moves government has ever made in terms of public health was that incredible drastic change to the food guides that people were following.
Absolutely, and it's played out too, because we're driven up the amount of strokes, the amount of heart attacks, the amount of dementia, even that we're seeing in people, the elderly, but also in general the sluggishness, the depression, all that stuff factors in to what we do to ourselves, what environment we create, and this would be the environment internally, what we eat. But yeah, so yeah, it was a big sin, if you will, a scandal.
Yeah. And Dr. Ratey, as you mentioned, it's played out for certain. We see it in the obesity rates, the childhood obesity rates, the alarming childhood obesity rates, but also, and you've mentioned this several times in your talks and in some of your books too, the idea that, this whole idea of Alzheimer's, degenerative brain disease, might not be what we thought it was originally, right? And this is maybe where, could this be, Dr. Ratey, an exciting time as we have experts like yourself and people in the industry diving into what's happening here and truly trying to get to the bottom of it. They're calling Alzheimer's and dementia and these degenerative brain diseases type 3 diabetes now. Lots of work from the Mayo Clinic, Harvard, Princeton, you name it. There's great work going on. So maybe this is an exciting time on that front. Do you think?
Oh, I do. And it's an exciting time on many fronts, especially now we have AI going crazy, because that is a real help, believe me. It can really lead to more rapid learning and more rapid uncovering and discoveries.
Yeah,
which I think is really what we're looking at, and so yeah, I do. It's a very exciting time. If the world would just slow down a little bit and quit changing on the meta level. And especially in the U.S. with our president always changing everything all the time.
Yeah. Well, you bring up a very good point. Maybe we could sort of wrap things up with this sentiment too, because I think what you just said there is very, very important. Slow things down a bit. In my world, in the sport performance world, Dr. Ratey, and you being a former athlete, I think you're pretty in tune with this. Youth development is in big trouble. The injury rates we see with our professional athletes, that's just a result of this incredibly corrupt and dysfunctional development system that we've now put onto the world. When youth sport became a massive industry generating tens of billions of dollars, I think that was a turning point for sure. But if we, like you said, if we could slow down and just get back to the basics, the basic fundamentals just really haven't changed. Would it be fair to say we're just understanding them better?
Yeah, no, we are. We're understanding them better and how important they are, to future star power. They're just really, really important. So, and that these things really do create the building blocks to leap forward. I'm thinking of the guy from the Dodgers, the Japanese guy, Ohana. How much training he has had in the basics, and so he can pitch and bat, and he's amazing. So you
Incredible. Shohei Ohtani, incredible,
yeah,
right? I mean,
yeah.
and we're seeing such incredible things happening. So I know we're kind of getting close, right? And people are maybe starting to listen. But this idea, Dr. Ratey, maybe we'll leave this to you. Like, we have parents, we have coaches, we've got athletes listening. Our audience base there's GMs of teams, coaches of professional and amateur organizations listening. It's a sport performance show. But when I look, in Canada, I'm actually very proud to be, part of the sports science world here in Canada, and the long-term athlete development program, which I believe is a beautiful document. It still needs work because we really haven't addressed the brain side, but we looked at the progressive development of youth athletes and what we should be focusing on during different phases of training. It's a long game. I guess maybe that's the big message.
Yep, it is. But you have to have the good building blocks.
Right.
And the good habits that are so important, and be aware of them. Now, one of the things that you made me think is my daughter was played in college soccer, right? And all the girls wanted to train like the boys, so they'd be running on concrete like the boys did. Well, it wasn't good for them. And so every one of her her teammates in college, because they were at a very good soccer team, had either surgeries or they had ice before the game, and as well as after the game. I mean, it was incredible to see this. They were all, talking every one of them, because they all trained, like crazy, but they didn't think about what they were doing, or people didn't advise them. Look, you can't be running like that on concrete. You gotta pay attention to how your body is different than the boys. So, and I think we're learning that now. But anyway, it just is so important. There's so many things like that we're appreciating now these days.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Dr. Ratey, thank you so much for coming on. We know you've got to get going here. I really appreciate this conversation. I'm looking forward to future conversations as well. Now that we've got this line of communication, be careful what you wish for, because I have questions. I have questions that I want answers, and you're part of that for sure. But if you were going to just, to the parents out there, to the coaches, to the athletes, if you had a message, like a message to send, what would that be to the people who are just maybe getting in tune with this whole world of the brain and the body connection?
Well, a big one is to do it is to pay attention to the outcome and what you want. And what you want is a functioning human being, someone that appreciates their own capacities as well as develop them, and not to just, like you're mentioning about the youth sports, not just to drive, but to also take time to enjoy and have fun. And one of the great things that we've learned in exercise these days is its impact on sociability, on being social. And maybe in the future we'll talk about that on your program, but it's so important, and especially in our world today, where a lot of people aren't very social anymore, and exercise is a way to bridge that, and it has another part to play in producing not just hormones and all the other stuff that makes us more social, but the opportunity to be with others and to really begin to realize how important that is.
Yeah, amazing. You talk about being part of that tribe, right? Being part of a tribe being so important, and sport can drive that for sure, but just exercise and getting out there. Dr. Ratey, thank you so much. Hey, first off, for all of the work that you've done. I've got most of your books, and they were very impactful for me and a lot of people that I know. So I want to thank you for that. And thanks for your time today. I really enjoyed this, and I can't wait to speak again.
Okay, very good. And good luck to the Blue Jays, huh?
Yeah, big off season coming up. We've got to overcome your Dodgers somehow here.
I was amazing. Ahead by 2 games and couldn't do it. Couldn't pull the trigger.
Oh boy, the Dodgers are so deep for sure. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
incredible stuff. Incredible stuff.
Okay.
Well, happy
Okay.
Thanksgiving to you and your family, Dr. Ratey.
Thank
Again,
you.
thank you for making time, and I will send you the links and follow up with all this.
Okay. Very good.
All
I
right.
enjoyed the whole procedure. So this is great.
Thanks so much. I look forward to talking soon.
Okay. Bye.
All right, everybody, there you go. What an incredible conversation all the way from Hawaii, where he hangs out in the wintertime. Dr. John Ratey, okay? Again, Associate Clinical Professor of Psychiatry at the Harvard School of Medicine. Listen, go to johnratey.com if you want to just get further into his work. If you're a parent, coach, or athlete, or an organization, this is a Crush must-read book. It's on our list for sure. And, when we talk about our priorities for development, even outside of sport, there's a reason that they're hierarchied the way they are. And for those of you who don't know, when we develop programs for athletes, we have 5 priorities. And for me, they're written in stone. Nobody has been able to convince me to change, move, or adapt this thinking yet. I'm not saying it can't happen, but nobody's convinced me that this isn't the right way to address long-term and short-term development for athletes everywhere, regardless of what level they're at. Our priorities for performance are sleep, number 1, and then rest and recovery. Sleep drives everything, impacts and affects everything, right? Then rest and recovery is critical. It's one of the most, I think, undermined areas of human performance. Any athlete or program right now that can really initiate a world-class recovery strategy has a one-up on all the competition without question, all right? But on top of that, all of the work we do in our annual planning, monthly planning, seasonal planning, day-to-day, session by session, even inside of our sessions, all the work has to be programmed around the quality and quantity of rest our athletes get, written in stone. Sleep, rest, and recovery. And then nutrition and hydration. Again, we know nutrition in the brain. We know nutrition in performance is so ingrained with how we think about human performance. But it is number 2. It's a close number 2, but number 2. And inside of that, hydration might be the lowest hanging fruit there, because very few athletes, students, hydrate properly day to day. And it's a game changer. So rest, recovery, sleep, nutrition, hydration, posture, range of motion, as I mentioned with Dr. Ratey. Then we teach movement, teaching our athletes how to move. Listen, the only reason we ever really initiate a well-designed strength program is to set this thing up so it can move better, okay, and prevent injuries, right? And part of moving better is being injury-free. So when we talk about the athlete development side and that strength and conditioning side, the conditioning is recovery. Cardiovascular conditioning, a cardiovascular foundation drives recovery, right? So it's so important. That's a pro tip, by the way. Cardiovascular conditioning has to be a part of your annual planning, right? But then also the strength work. And again, depending on where the athlete is in their growth and development, it's really important to make sure you're doing the right types of strength work for the athlete in their development, but then also looking at the sport and the sport demands that they have, all based on the amount of rest and recovery they get over any period of time. After movement is the 5th priority, and this one's a very interesting one because it's the latest. It's probably within the last 5 years become a solid part of our top 5 priorities. Used to only be those 4, but the brain game, the Crush brain game. The brain game is an interesting one because it is a rover. It isn't necessarily number 5, right? And depending on where your athletes are at, if they're sleeping and recovery well, that's taken care of. Now posture or movement might be a priority, or the things that will help create movement, okay? But then when it comes to the brain game, let's just think about it. And that's why this conversation with Dr. Ratey today was so important. The brain game. And if you go back into the Crush archives, you can just type in brain game and get all of our episodes associated with it. Fascinating stuff with the world's best people in that area, right? So we've learned a lot just here in the radio show, but applying it in the real world of elite performance, that's where I've really, again, connected some dots. And that's where I know that every athlete has this little bit of untapped potential somewhere, if you know how to just connect everything here. But the brain game is a rover. Okay, it's not necessarily, okay, we this, and this, though those first four are that way. Without sleep, rest, and recovery, nothing else matters. Once that's in place, nutrition and hydration will drive everything. Now, is the body functioning proper? Range of motion, balance around the joints, posture, range of motion. And then we teach movement. Once those are set up, we can really get the most out of our movement. And then we send that well-rounded, grounded athlete into their sport to be coached to the next level. We are creating coachable players. But that brain game, man, oh man, it is so important, and it's so versatile. So for example, here's a great analogy. If we had an athlete that might have like anxiety, like performance anxiety, a competition day, they don't sleep well, their stomach's upset, and it actually affects their well-being or their ability to perform. Well, now that's a condition. That's where, if that anxiety is disrupting sleep, for example, well, now sleep is no longer the number one priority because we have something roadblocking, disrupting our sleep. So we got to get in there and start building coping strategies and plans to help that athlete overcome the anxiety. Okay, anxiety is a real thing, and it can be very serious. You have to respect this stuff. But if you understand it and know how to deal with it, you can use it as a driver for performance. Depression, anxiety, stress in general, okay? Negative stresses, relationship, money stress. There's all these things that can impact a person, a human being, that can impact their performance. And that's not just in sport, everybody. That could be the people you work with. I've worked in the mills, and I've worked, on the assembly lines, and that's a dangerous. You have to be on there. I have friends who are in the police force, and we know people in the military. That's real life stuff. So though we use sport as our platform here for our conversations, I hope everybody understands and appreciates it, that almost everything we talk about on the show can leak into other parts of society, well beyond sport. Anywhere humans are trying to perform and even get better at something, I believe this stuff applies. You just got to calibrate it to what you're doing, right? So when we talk about, the brain game and this work with Dr. Ratey, Spark, and how exercise influences the brain, especially when it comes to learning and skill acquisition and talent development, just absolutely groundbreaking, great stuff. And these are the things we believe we need to be talking about. We always say on the show, boy, our job, if I were to give myself a job description, like I would say, Jeff, here's your job. It's to get people thinking about things they're not thinking about yet, which means I got to get out there and think about things as well. That's why this bookshelf looks the way it is. You guys read these books, I'm telling you what, you're going to gain some knowledge. But then, talking to the people that researched and wrote the books or did the research for the books, that's where the books just become so powerful. And those are the messages we want to send to you. So I have to thank Dr. Ratey for coming on. That was a long time coming. I am so happy today's discussion happened. And I'm so happy you guys are right here to enjoy it as well. If this does raise more questions for you, freaking write to me. You might get me thinking about something I'm not thinking about yet or haven't thought about for a long time. And that's the beauty of this relationship. All the crushers out there and myself trying to just get better. That's what it's all about. And honest to goodness, I think I have to thank Dr. Ratey for every one of my athletes that I've ever worked with, because he has influenced my thinking to some degree. Just like my profs at university, the coaches I work with, the athletes I work with have all just sort of culminated in this room and in our discussions to what we think is important for everybody out there, and we continue to learn. So today was another example. So I want to thank Dr. Ratey for coming on. I want to thank you guys for joining us. Absolutely fantastic. For all of our American friends, happy Thanksgiving to you. Holiday is right around the corner, and we'll look forward to talking to you next time right here on Crush Performance.
Find out what it takes to be a top performer. Get the Crush blog, podcast, and newsletter at crushperformance.com.
Goodbye now. Don't forget to write.